What's going on, guys? My name is Trevor. Welcome back to the channel. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse swung its way into theaters this past weekend, making it the 10th Spider-Man movie. So today I'm ranking all 10 Spider-Man movies from my least favorite to my favorite. I do not think there is a bad Spider-Man movie, just some I prefer over others. There are going to be a lot of hot takes in here, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Let me know your ranking down below in the comment section. Leave a like as well as hit the subscribe button and notification bell, and let's get into this ranking. So at number 10 is going to be The Amazing Spider-Man. I do not hate this movie. I would say it is a solid 3.5 out of 5. This is one I go back and rewatch the least out of all these Spider-Man movies. Andrew Garfield is a fantastic Peter Parker. Emma Stone's a great love interest in Gwen Stacy, and this one works very well because it feels like a coming-of-age high school vibe that you want. Andrew Garfield plays his character so much differently than Tobey Maguire, which I always really appreciated because this is the first time we saw another live-action Spider-Man, and I just feel like they could have done a little bit more with this movie to make it a little bit more enjoyable and not so cheesy, and at times a little bit slow. Lizard is a solid villain, though. At number 9 is The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This one I put over The Amazing Spider-Man because of the ending with Gwen Stacy. I never thought in a million years that she was not going to live, and I didn't think that Peter Parker wouldn't be able to save the love of his life, so when I saw it for the first time, I was shocked. I'm not gonna lie to you, my jaw dropped to the floor. It set up to that pivotal moment, had that emotional scene, and it's done really well, and it's probably one of the most emotional moments throughout any of these Spider-Man movies, and it's set up perfectly for a third one, which we never got. The ending of this movie, when I first watched it, got me really hyped up when the little kid stood with a Spider-Man mask on, and Andrew Garfield finally shows up. You're like, he's back! We're gonna get a third one! And we never got a third one. I feel like if we got a third one, I would enjoy the Amazing Spider-Man movies that much more, but they're my bottom two. At number 8 is Spider-Man Far From Home. This is one of my bottom tier MCU movies, but I put this one above the Amazing Spider-Mans because I love Tom Holland's version of Spider-Man that much. But of all the Spider-Man movies on this list, I would say that Far From Home feels like the least Spider-Man-y movie of them all. This time they're in Europe, and I never liked that they went off to Europe. The humor doesn't really hit, and I always said the Mysterio was just a lackluster villain. He was like a Tony Stark wannabe, and if Mysterio actually had powers, he wasn't just his tech genius, he actually had powers, it would have made him that much more menacing and that much more scary because Jake Gyllenhaal is a fantastic actor, and obviously everything that happened in this movie went on to go and affect No Way Home, so it makes him a little bit more better of a villain, but the whole movie, he's just trying to trick basically a high school kid. That never really sat well with me. And every time I go back and rewatch this one, I just find myself dozing off, not being too interested in it, but you do get lots of that Tom Holland charm as Peter Parker. He's my favorite live-action version of Peter Parker, so to be able to see him back on the screen, his relationship with MJ really progresses in this movie. Everyone finds out that he's Spider-Man in this movie, has some good Spider-Man action, and has a really good scene towards the end when Spider-Man's going through all of those trans and Mysterio's putting him in, and it ends greatly. Just, I wanted a little bit more from our villain in this movie, and I wanted to feel more of those lower stakes Spider-Man vibes that Homecoming gave us, but nonetheless, Far From Home, it's solid enough. At number 7 is Spider-Man 3. This is pure nostalgia for me. This one, the stakes seem high. It is a darker movie, and it is a little bit of a slower movie, but the Venom symbiote attaches himself to Peter, and then you get Eddie Brock in there, and he becomes Venom throughout this movie. Not a big fan of Topher Grace as Eddie Brock, but he does the best he can. I've always been a huge fan of the character of Harry Osborn. He's one of my favorite characters, if not my favorite character from the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. So to see him get the limelight and take on like that goblin role throughout this film, that got me just so excited. I hope we get to see a Harry Osborn in the MCU. And when Harry dies in this movie, it hits hard. You got that brother relationship between Pete and Harry, and so when he saves Peter in the end, he dies for him. I mean, it hits you right in the feels. But also, this movie has lots of villains in it, from Venom, from the Green Goblin and Harry Osborn to Sandman. This movie has lots of great villains all on the big screen together, just not handled all that well. It kind of fumbles the bag a little bit here and there, but nonetheless, every time I go and watch this movie, it makes me feel like a little kid all over again. I thought Sandman was always a great villain who you could relate to. I love this movie. I can gush about it all day. At number 6 is Spider-Man 2, and I mentioned we have some hot takes in here, and this is probably my hottest take of the day. I'm not saying I don't enjoy this movie because I absolutely love it. I think Doc Ock's one of the best villains inside the Spider-Man universe. This is one of the greatest comic book sequels of all time. There literally is nothing really bad to say about it. It has all the same vibes that the first Spider-Man had, but this one, everything's up the ante just a little bit. Doc Ock does present that villain threat to Peter very well throughout this because he's someone that Peter likes, kind of how Norman Osborn was. They kind of have a friendship and a relationship in there, but Doc Ock goes off the deep end in this movie, and the action towards the end, especially on that train scene, is some of the best you've seen, especially for the early 2000s. Making us in the top 5 is the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man. This one is the most nostalgic for me because it's the one Spider-Man movie that I watched all the time as a kid, and I am still to this day terrified of Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin, easily my favorite Spider-Man villain of them all. But just the lower stakes vibe of this high school movie and this character and this kid getting superpowers, how would you react? You're gonna go try to climb a building. That's exactly exactly what I think a lot of kids would try to do, to try and go test out their powers. It hits on all of them so well when he's trying to go out there and he's like, fly, Shazam, go web, go. And those moments are all very funny because I feel like they're so relatable as to what a high school kid who just got superpowers would act like, trying to figure them out. And Tobey Maguire plays that oh so well. But Willem Dafoe, Norman Osborn as the Green Goblin, easily by far is the best part about this movie. One of the best villains in cinematic history. When he's looking in the mirror talking to himself, but he can't really see himself, and he's hear the Green Goblin voice. It's terrifying. It's menacing. This movie has that, and it has some of the best swinging action you'll ever see from a Spider-Man movie. It's great. Being back in 2002, it still holds up to this day. At number 4 is Spider-Man Homecoming. This is such a lower stakes Spider-Man movie that's not an origin story. He already has his powers. He's already trying to live the life of Peter Parker and Spider-Man, so we get tossed into his world that is such a lower stakes because we saw him once in Civil War. He wants to go out and be an Avenger, but now he's just solving really just street crime, people robbing a couple grocery stores and things like that. He wants so much more, but he's not ready for it yet, so he has that internal struggle that you can really relate to as a character, someone who's very talented, someone who is worthy of doing more, but is set into his place by his mentor that he's not ready for yet, because he's not. And Vulture's one of my favorite villains inside the MCU, and he's one of my favorite Spider-Man villains for that matter as well, and Michael Keaton plays this villain so well, and when he opens that door, when everything's going hunky-dory, it's just a nice, fun high school movie. You forget you're watching a comic book movie sometimes. You forget that there's a villain out there in Vulture, and then all of a sudden Peter walks up to prom, the music's playing, it's gonna be great, and Vulture opens that door. To this day, I think that was the most surprise that ever was in a movie. My favorite plot twist of all time. I love the lower stakes and high school vibes. This movie really feels like a coming of age movie, but I also love how menacing the Vulture is in this film, and Tom Holland and Peter Parker is my favorite live action version of Peter Parker. At number 3 is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. This is the ultimate Spider-Man movie. 1,000+ Spider-Man characters all on screen at the same time, and it is everything and more you could want. As much as this is a Miles Morales story, it is as much a Gwen Stacy story. It's literally a 50-50 split on whose story there is. Their stories are so similar. They're going down the same path, but in different dimensions. And I love the character of Gwen Stacy so much. And I like that they gave her so much more limelight throughout this movie. She's so relatable. She's so likable. And I want to see a spin-off solo Gwen Stacy animated Spider-Verse movie. Miles Morales is my favorite version of Spider-Man we've ever gotten. And he continues to prove it why throughout this movie. He's so lovable and cocky and swaggy. And he's just a cool version of Spider-Man that I feel like we haven't seen with the live action versions, because the live action versions have always been these nerdier kids, and Miles Morales, while yes he is smart, he is more of an artist. He more has that hipster style to him, and that's why I always like this character a little bit more than the other versions of Spider-Man. You get so many returning characters that we know and love from Into the Spider-Verse in this movie, mainly Peter B. Parker. When he showed up on screen, I smiled ear to ear because he's one of my favorite parts of Into the Spider-Verse, so seeing him back, it just made me feel so good. But getting introduced to characters like Miguel O'Hara, I mean, this guy is menacing. You can feel his pain, and he's a villain with a backstory, but he's not really a villain. He's a leader of this secret Spider-Man society, and Oscar Isaac voices this guy, and he voices him so well. And Miguel O'Hara has this whole chase scene with Miles. It's epic, it's dark, it's scary, and he has that villain presence that you know and love. And he's one of my favorite news characters inside the Spider-Man universe, one of my favorite versions or variants of Spider-Man. I love the character of Miguel O'Hara, I love the character of Gwen Stacy, and I love the way this movie ended with a to be continued. At number 2 is Spider-Man No Way Home. When I got done watching this movie in the theaters for the first time, it was unlike any other feeling I felt before after watching a movie. All the hype, all the anticipation leading up to this movie, you're wanting to see all 3 Spider-Mans on the big screen on the same time together, and when it delivered on that, you could not help just feel the overwhelming amount of joy and happiness, and that's exactly what I felt. Easily to this day, the best theater reaction I've ever had. And while I still stand by this, I think the beginning of this movie is a little bit clunky, is a little bit all over the place, doesn't really find its footing. When Toby and Andrew show up on screen, this movie truly comes into form. It makes it one of the best comic book experiences of all time, and getting all these villains from previous movies back on the big screen, aka Doc Ock, Jamie Foxx's Electro, and Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. Green Goblin is as menacing, if not more menacing in this movie than he was in the original Spider-Man movie, killing Aunt May, sending Peter down this just trail of just negativity and anger. You can feel his emotion on screen, and when Peter and Goblin are fighting at the end, it's emotional. You feel Tom Holland's performance just coming to the screen, all that emotion and anger you feel as his character. It has all the emotions. You'll be excited, you'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll get angry, and overall, you'll just be happy. And the way this movie ends is truly heartbreaking because Peter realizes that his friends, who now no longer remember him, are better off and safer without him in their lives. It's sad to see, but he's doing what a superhero has to do. But at number 1 is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. The animation style is absolutely fantastic, but just getting a movie like this for the first time is nothing short of extraordinary, with a fantastic soundtrack soundtrack to back it up. But a crazy animated style movie about Miles Morales, a character a lot of us aren't familiar with, at least I wasn't at the time. And seeing a Spider-Man story told yet again, getting bit by a radioactive spider. How is it going to change? What's going to happen now this time around? How is it going to be different? And it stands on its own 2 feet so well. There's so much loss and tragedy, and Miles Morales has to take that leap of faith. And I would say that's my favorite moment in probably a comic book movie ever, when he's sitting there on the top of that building, he's trying to just really figure out his powers as Spider-Man, and you hear Peter B. Parker's voice in the background.
That's all it is, Miles. A leap of faith.
Like, what's up, danger?
That right there and that scene alone easily makes this movie what it is. It has my favorite soundtrack of all time, one of my favorite scores of all time, and it makes it for my favorite Spider-Man movie of all time. I absolutely love the SpiderVerse movies and Spider-Man in general, as he's my favorite superhero of all time, and I cannot wait for Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse next year. Let me know your ranking of all 10 of these movies down below in the comment section, and leave a like, hit a subscribe button, notification bells. We're trying to hit 5,000 subscribers here on the channel, and thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.